it's tradition. Okay? So first you had form and content. Then after a while you just get the form. And especially when you have a rigid form and there's no understanding behind it, then when people approach who are intelligent, they say, well, why do we do it this way? And when they get no answer, then you get the real death. So first there's form and content. Then without proper understanding why, then you just get the form. And then eventually when there's no good reason that the people are receiving for why they do what they do, then the form will also die. You see? And this is why it's so important to understand what we do and why we do, so we can convey it properly. For example, sometimes devotees, we hear about the importance of the Brahma Muhurta hour, right? A particular early time in the day. What often isn't understood is that at that time in the day, the mind is more neuroplastic. So for example, if people rise early and they chant during the Brahma Muhurta, it leaves a deeper impression in their consciousness. You see? So when it's advised, if you want to really progress, rise early, rise in Brahma Muhurta, chant during that time, it's like, yeah, that just sounds good. But kind of practically no idea why they're saying that. So we should also know the purpose why. If we know why we're doing what we're doing, then we can intelligently apply according to time, place, and circumstance. If we don't know the why behind something, then you get this kind of rigid to the point of being irrelevant outreach. Okay? That's the whole point. Without understanding, and nothing's bad, but we should understand why we're doing what we're doing. You should be able to explain it, and it will also impact the preaching. Why? Because if you understand and you know a good reason why you're doing what you're doing, your same conviction will spill over. Right? So, in the modern world, you have loads of people who are con men, right? Con men or con women, right? Let's not be prejudiced. So, what does that mean? It means that they can override other people's actual discrimination just by their speaking very confidently. They can say stuff which actually, if you think about it, it doesn't actually make any sense, right? But they sounded so confident. So what does that mean? It actually means the mode of passion. So they get away with it in the short term, but in the long term, everyone realizes I've been cheated. Now, something else happens. If there's confidence and it's based upon the truth, then its power lasts forever. You see? So what we're trying to do in our in-reach is to be confident of the truth. Because then when we speak, the conviction will be so strong. Because actually what you're saying, whether the person believes it or not, that will stand the test of time. You tell someone gravity works. You throw something up, it goes down. Literally, it doesn't matter whether they believe you or not. Right? All you're doing is describing a feature of reality. So in the same way, if we actually understand the teachings properly, especially if we have realization, when you describe it to someone, there actually becomes two voices. From the outside, there's your voice telling them something about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And from within their heart, Krishna is telling them, listen to this person, she knows what she's talking about. Right? And this is why our preaching is never individual. We're always being supported by Krishna to the extent that we're doing what we're meant to be doing. Right? There's a subtle difference between Krishna's mission and the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishna says, Sarvadharma Parityaja, you surrender first, then we'll talk about prema. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission is different. Right? Qualified, unqualified, practically makes no difference. Make sure that you offer them the mercy of the Lord. Right? It's technically, Lord Chaitanya's mood is actually that of Srimati Radharani. Who Prabhupada said in one Radhastami class in London, he called her Jagan Mata, our mother Radharani. So this is the mood that we're trying to convey, and we're trying to rebuild this. Another key point is that we want to listen more than we talk. Because if I want to, and in this purport, 1.5.16, it talked about medicinal doses. So I should understand the patient so I can give the medicine in the best possible way, right? Actually, preaching in many cases means relationship. Even if it's a short interaction on the street, you're from London? I was in London 2 years ago. That's amazing, right? We've got something in common, right? So building that bridge, building that relationship, building that trust, so that the person thinks, you know what? Oh, this person, there's something about them that I like. Therefore, I will actually look into what they're giving me. According to some research, when people meet you, there are 2 questions that they ask themselves, consciously or unconsciously, about you. The first question is, do I like this person? And the second question is, are they credible? Okay? So don't underestimate that. Don't think, it doesn't matter. No, it does. Do I like this person? So how we approach, how we speak, all these things. Do I like this person? Second question is, are they credible? Right? Is this someone who's worth listening to? Are they coherent? Is what they're saying does what they say make sense? Okay. So again, in this sense, when we want to have that understanding of reaching out to people, we want to make sure that we present ourselves and present the teachings properly. It is said that in this age of Kali, it's the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. So my spiritual master made a comment. He said, because it's the age of quarrel, he said that, and this is something you can do also if you really like to go deep into the teaching. You read something and then you ask yourself, what's the implication of that? Okay? So for example, Kali Yuga is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. Who's heard that before? Yeah, I think we all have, right? Now, the next stage is, what does that imply? So the age of quarrel. If it's the age of quarrel, it means that there'll be disagreement. Make sense? Because that's what quarrel means. Therefore, what's implied is that any project, any organization, any team, even any community, marriage, whatever business that's successful is one where people have learned to deal with disagreements in a healthy way. You understand? You see how it works? There's going to be quarrel, because that's what the scripture says, the age of quarrel. So therefore, any group, partnership, business, ashram, whatever it is that remains healthy is one where people have learned to deal with conflicts in a healthy way. Now, the second factor is quarrel and hypocrisy. Okay. Now, there's an implication to this hypocrisy. See, hypocrisy is what? It's when one thing, it is when a situation looks one way, but there's something else going on. Right? Or, that people say one thing and do something else. What does that mean? It means presentation is a big thing in Kali Yuga. Right? In Kali Yuga, image is everything. In fact, if you look carefully, you'll see many people, if you give, there'll be some kind of pseudo-spiritual groups, and they'll be giving something which is basically nothing, right? And people will be paying thousands of dollars for it. And then you'll have another group who's giving very, very deep substance, and no one even wants to take it. And the other group are giving it away for free, and no one's taking it. You see? So what we have to do in this Kali Yuga age, and Prabhupada in his prayers when he was coming to the West, he said the Western world is completely immersed in the modes of ignorance and passion. You see? So ignorance and passion, it causes a certain type of perception where people don't see the deep substance of something. I mean, you may get a rare 1 or 2 people who do, but the majority don't see the deep substance of something. That means if you want to show people the value of this, then wherever and whenever possible, you have to make sure that it's nicely presented. Okay? So we have to do justice to the teaching. Right? So you present it in a way that's attractive, because it is attractive. You see, that's the difference. That's why it's not hypocritical. Because the teaching is attractive. It is powerful. But if I know my audience, I also know that they're being bombarded with millions of adverts all the time. Right? They're already overloaded. So if I then say, well, here's some Mahaprasad, yeah, I know there's a few hairs in it, but it's okay. It's transcendental, Prabhu. then don't be surprised that no one wants to go near you. You understand the point? Yeah? And then it's like, they're in Maya, They didn't understand, it was a really good abdomen, it's been offered to the deities. Yeah, good luck. Yeah. So the point is, we have to make sure that we try to present it nicely. And you'll see that Prabhupada, what does Prabhupada say? Just trying to be happy. It's okay. Just trying to be happy. You've been trying for a long time, right? You're still thinking, well, hold on. But was that a marketing, was that a marketing line? Of course, we will be happy as we do it properly. But the point is that we try to present nicely. I was in London, we were doing some youth outreach programs, and they were going really well. They went really well. And there was one young lady, she was from India, but she came to London to do a master's. And she was doing a master's in, I think it was graphic design and things of that nature. And so she was at the ISKCON London Temple. This is quite some years ago. And I just asked her for some feedback. I said, so, what do you think of the posters, the different programs? And she said, they're all bad. And she actually told me, because she was studying this whole thing about how you advertise and how you present things. And she said, all of these posters, they all break all the laws of marketing and advertising. That's what she told me. And she gave a few examples. She said, for example, because again, she was studying this as a master's, I think it was at UCL or somewhere. She said, when you do a poster, people should be able to understand immediately what you're advertising at a glance. If it's too difficult to understand, because they're bombarded with adverts all the time, they'll just switch off. She told me that. She said another thing is when you have a poster, she said the images should never compete with the words for attention. It should be clean enough that you're not trying to figure out what's the picture and what's the title or what does it mean. It should be very clear and very obvious. So she gave me a few points like that. And so it's really, really important just to understand these things. There's an actual science to it, So when we do something, we're looking to give people the maximum opportunity to say yes or to at least consider Krishna consciousness, And then, of course, as we see in Prabhupada's example, it's not one size fits all, right? So what is a great example of this in Prabhupada's time? A great example of this is Prabhupada's preaching and the emphasis he gave to preaching to scientists, right? So the Bhaktivedanta Institute. So he had his Holy Swarup Damodar Maharaj and others, PhDs, specifically focusing on presenting the philosophy to the scientific community. And then I know another example when Prabhupada was speaking to Pt2 Maharaj and others who are doing university programs, he said, when you go to the universities, do not tell them that this Krishna consciousness is rules and regulations. He said, when you go to the university, make sure you explain to them that this is a higher philosophy. See? So again, it's not one size fits all, because different audiences have different needs, interests, and concerns. Yeah? Not that, again, we read this First Canto, Chapter 4, text number 1 in the purple. We don't change the essence, but we do present it in a way that's meaningful according to time, place, circumstance, and audience. That's the point here. A few other points. It's important to speak from your realization. What you have conviction and realization of, if you share that, it's very powerful. You see? That's the point. If you share what you actually understand, it's solid. If you stray into areas that you don't understand, you may be in a little bit of difficulty, like that. Also, it's important to inspire rather than force. People have been forced in, and I'm talking not just, this is an interest one, I'm not just talking about people who are non-devotees, I'm talking about people who are even born in the movement. Right? It's better to inspire than force. Right? Well, there's a saying, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Yeah? Mm-hmm. This is a big problem they have even in the business community, that if you force people, they will comply, but you'll get nothing more than that. And the moment they can get away, they'll just dump whatever you've told them. Yeah? Very, very important. If you want something to stick, then what you want to do is inspire. What's the difference between inspiring and forcing? It's the mood. You see? The difference is the mood. Someone actually feels that this is good for me. It's very interesting. You'll see in both the Srimad Bhagavatam and Mahabharata. In both literatures, it points out that people are self-interested. Right? And the Prabhupada will sometimes say our real self-interest is service to Krishna. Yeah? So if people are self-interested, again, what does that imply? It means we have to show them how Krishna consciousness is going to help them. Right? I've sometimes seen it that, devotees will say things like, you need to become Krishna conscious, otherwise Krishna won't be happy with you. Okay, good luck. Or, Prabhupada won't like that, Prabhupada said. And it's almost like they're just weaponizing Prabhupada. And you can see after a while, people are just desensitized because they know Prabhupada said many things, right? So you're just picking one particular quote that supports whatever you want to do. Right? And actually, you will find, if you look carefully, sometimes Prabhupada gives more than one answer to exactly the same question. Yeah. Often Prabhupada will say that you know that Krishna is pleased when the spiritual master is pleased. Right? There was one occasion with Keshava Bharati Maharaj. He asked Prabhupada the same question. Prabhupada said, you'll know that Krishna is pleased when you're satisfied. And it was an interesting answer. Because the understanding is that because we're part and parcel of Krishna, when Krishna's actually pleased, you feel a deep satisfaction, a spiritual satisfaction inside. So it's the same question, different angles of vision. There's more than one answer sometimes. So we should speak according to our realization. We should try to inspire people, Behind that always is this idea that we want to be respectful. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he sent some of his disciples to the West, to London, to England to preach. And he gave them, you can find it, he gave them some direction. And he really emphasized, when you go to the West, be very humble. You see? There's a lot of powerful meaning to this. We can say that we have the highest truth, right? Or we have been given the highest truth. That means the teaching is very high, but it doesn't mean we're very high. You see? And people, there's a big competition that goes on in the material world. And the competition is that everyone wants to play God. So if you get into that, you're competing with everyone else. Good luck. But if everyone wants to play God and then you're humble, that's a niche market. Right? Then you can really, you've carved your own niche out. So in the same way, you're dealing with people, they're used to people trying to play God, trying to control them, tell them what to do, manipulate them, and you come with a completely different energy. Wow, that's a game changer. Why? How did this work? What is going on here? So this is why it's important to be humble and respectful. We always show respect for whoever we're dealing with. Because also, the way that they will understand Krishna is through you. People have been so let down by authority that unless they see someone who's actually humble, who's actually tolerant, who actually has a selfless concern for their well-being, unless they see that, they're not going to believe that there's someone who is a supreme person who actually has their best interests at heart, because they've never seen it. They can't relate to it. Most people, it's a dog-eat-dog society. They've never met someone who did not have some kind of ulterior motive or selfish agenda until they meet you. I was working in one company with one manager who was annoying me, to be very honest. And then I'll tell you what happened. It was very interesting. One day, and I was just feeling like, oh, this person's just so annoying. It was really annoying. One day we were working with one client, so we went to the client's offices. And I'm standing there with this particular manager. And so he turns to me and he said, you know what? He said, there's a reason why you and I are working together. He told me that. And then he told me, he said, I think it was a year before this conversation, he said, that in this company that I was working for, they had all these different groups, like social groups. And he said, I went to a talk. He said, I think it was from the South Asian Society. And he said, this person came to deliver the talk. And he says, he's an unusual person. He said, I didn't really vibe with what he was saying. He said, but what really impressed me about this person was the energy around him. Right? He said, I could see that he had a certain kind of peace and some kind of inner satisfaction that was kind of rare or unique. And he said, I bought his book, He says, it's a good book. He said, I read this book on Sunday. I just sit in the bathtub and I read this book by this person. And he said, it's a good book. And he said, and I said, who's the person? What's the person's name? He said, the person's name is Radha Swami. Yeah. And he was reading The Journey Home. Yeah. And the person who said that, he didn't even know I was a devotee. He said to me, he said, there's a reason why you and I are working together. That's what he actually told me. Yeah. So also don't think that your impact never think that your impact has no value. It always has value. We have to learn to think in the short term as well as the mid-term as well as the long term. You see? So sometimes someone thinks, oh, it didn't, I did something, I tried to reach out, they didn't accept. That's the end of the story. It's not the end of the story. If you do what you're meant to be doing, then you'll see that there's a journey that every living entity goes on. And every time they meet a devotee, they're getting additional blessings, additional spiritual credit. We sometimes call this sukriti, or agyata sukriti. It's building up. And it builds up to the point that one is ready to hear properly and accept or move in the direction of Krishna consciousness. So it's like a tag team. We're all working together in this regards. What time is it right now?
It's 1:11.
1:11, okay. So anyway, let me stop here and see what questions, comments that you have. These are just some ideas to think about, reaching out in a much more holistic way. So understanding the importance of presenting it nicely, being connected ourselves, understanding our audience, and also we just touched upon the recognition that different audiences may require a different approach, and it's not some kind of idea. This is what Prabhupada did. Bhaktivedanta Institute had a different approach. He gave a slightly different nuance and instruction for the university or student outreach, etc., etc. Okay, so yes, we'll start there and I'll come to the gentleman. Yes.
Thank you so much. That was really, really informative and inspiring. I had a question on the first purport we were talking about in the Bhagavatam.
Yes.
And Prabhupada is saying, I'm paraphrasing, but Prabhupada was saying how someone who's self-realized, or someone who's working to be self-realized, or not necessarily fully engaged, should be hearing about the pastimes of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
You could say that. You could say that.
So I was wondering, sometimes when people are new and they're coming in, they might not be totally inclined to hear about,
Sure.
a battle between, Krishna and a demon, for example. They might be, but in some ways they might not be.
Sure.
So I was wondering if maybe you have any ideas that have worked, or other ways. Of course, you said it varies, time, place, and circumstance.
Exactly.
But maybe some examples of how we can engage them properly.
Sure.
Or some examples that you've done.
To engage properly, you should understand properly. If you see them, everyone can have a connection to Krishna. Prabhupada once he saw that the Sikhs, because they're Kshatriyas, he was saying that they could be our guards for our temples. Yeah, because he was looking and seeing where can they meaningfully begin their connection to Krishna. So it's not so. Also, when we talk about hearing Krishna's pastimes, the Bhagavad Gita is also Krishna's pastimes. Krishna and Arjuna speaking on the battlefield. But the point is that you're trying to connect them to Krishna in a way that is progressive and also will help them to move forward. Right? And that's also Harinam. Even if they hear the holy names, that's a connection to Krishna that's meaningful, that will help them to move forward. And the more purely people can chant, the more benefit everyone gets. Yeah? So this is also another point. Prabhupada says purity is the force. Yeah? Purity is the force. If we really are serious about benefiting others, we must try to take Krishna consciousness as deeply as we can ourselves. When I first went to Vrindavan in 2001, and before that, I remember my friends used to rave about a devotee called Ayendra Prabhu and his kirtans. And I listened to his kirtan and I didn't feel anything. I thought, no, I'm not feeling it. I went to Vrindavan, we were on Yatra, it was Kartik, visiting many different holy places. Until one evening we went to the temple. And we went there, it was quite late, and there was Ayendra and maybe two or three other people doing kirtan. And when I sat in this kirtan, it was just a completely different experience. And I really think it must be his actual purity. is actually the purity. So Prabhupada says purity is the force. Yeah. It is actually our ability to allow Krishna's mercy to work through us. So, to your point, yes, there's many different ways to engage. That's why there are some instructions in the scripture which are exclusive, and some instructions in the scripture are details, right? So there's more than one way in which you can connect people to the teaching. It's not that you have to sit them down, okay, in Vrindavan, Krishna killed this demon. You can talk about that, but there's many other ways in which you can do it. It's not an exclusive instruction. But the principle behind it is that we want to help them to have a meaningful and purifying and progressive connection to Krishna consciousness in whichever way, shape or form that we can. Is that okay? Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes?
I wanted to know in London, like, what do you look for? Like, what are what are some of the types of people you like to look for? Or do you throw out like a wide net to cultivate? And then what do those systems look like from bringing somebody off the street into eventually converting to a devotee these days?
So in London, they reach out to many different groups. Right? That's the first thing. But they have an ecosystem. So we have an ecosystem in London. So there's different types of programs which will tend to reach out to different audiences. So for quite some years, and I think Anantaja, you used to come to some of the EY programs. I think you've been to some. So we were hosting these talks at one corporate organization. And actually I did something recently there actually it was a month ago or so, a month or 2 months ago. So we were speaking about a month and a half ago, was about happiness. It was called Happiness is an Inside Job. And so we're talking about happiness, what it means, and then we're bringing through some verses from the Bhagavad Gita on, about the true happiness, etc., etc. And so it's for a corporate audience. So these are all, corporate professionals, mostly young professionals, some of whom work at EY, some of whom work at other organizations. And we're speaking, I know that, Radha Maharaj has spoken at EY, Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj, John Muli Maharaj, we asked him to come. So that's one organization, one type of program. Then for many years, and it's still going strong, there's been a lot of university outreach. So about 26 different universities, they have regular programs. So there's different either devotees at those universities or people who are favorable to Krishna consciousness at those universities, and they create a student union. Since you asked, I'll tell you something on this. So we started that we started that in the late 90s. So myself and a few others, we were doing programs at my old university, London School of Economics. So at the time we called it the Spiritual Arts Society. And at that time some other devotees wanted to expand that, and they wanted to make it uniform. So they wanted to have the same title for all the university outreach programs. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj came to the UK to do his PhD. His PhD was on Prabhupada's intellectual contribution to the Parampara. And that PhD was made into the book, which is A Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti by Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So I asked him about it. I said that they want us to change the name of our university outreach program, because we call it the Spiritual Arts Society. And I asked his advice, and he said to me, it depends on your audience. He said, you have to know your audience so well that you can see how to package it. He said, if they can take it, that you call it something else, and you do that. If they can't, then you call it whatever you need to call it. And he said to me, if Prabhupada was here, he would say, if the books go out, if the holy name goes out, and if prasadam goes out, he said, if Prabhupada was here, he said, as long as these three things go out, the preaching is a success. So we have the university outreach, and then from there, so they have, as I said, an ecosystem. So the idea is that when people come in from different programs, then they're taken on a journey. So there's Kirtan London. So, for people who are into Kirtan, maybe more the yoga audience, so there's regular programs there. And by the way, these programs don't all happen in the temple. There's different programs in different locations for different groups. David Rita Maharaj was recently in London, and I know the temple president at the London temple, he's been in touch with David Rita Maharaj regularly. They've started the program. I've spoken there about maybe 3 or 4 times. Actually, they asked me to speak again, so that wasn't for this coming week, but we won't be able to do it because of the schedule, but they call it Studio 108. And so they actually have a building which is maybe it's 10 minutes from my old university. And it's in a place called Holborn, and that's one stop away from Tottenham Court Road where the ISKCON London Temple is. So they've actually got a building, and they have regular programs, and actually they're having more than one. I think they're having a few programs a week. One evening is a kirtan night, another evening is philosophy, and they've just started doing these workshop programs. Actually, that's the program. They're doing something on Tuesday. So there's a disciple of Dave and Rita Maharaj called Jai Murari. So she's just started looking after this Tuesday program, which is some kind of like interactive workshop. So it's basically how to apply the spiritual teachings in your daily life. So that's going on. And so through all these programs, and you can then take them to retreats. So every year for years they've been having retreats to different countries, and then also retreats at the temple. So they'll have a university retreat at least once or twice a year at the Bhaktivedanta Manor, and they'll come, they'll do cow milking, they'll see the deities at the altar and do other things. And usually you get about 100 plus people, students, at the retreats, and they'll have kirtan. They always have great kirtan, actually. They really like the kirtan. And then in that way, you have different programs. So, just trying to think, so they have professional outreach, student outreach, obviously the home programs, so bhakti vrikshas, house programs, classes at the temples, festivals. Yeah, those are some of the main ones. And then they'll go out and do kirtan at different people's venues. So there's a lot of activity in that sense. And that's also something that could be expanded a lot more, that different organizations will invite devotees who have the right profile. Can you come and speak at our company? Like that. So there's different things like that. And then obviously you've got your social media and things like that. But the idea is that as people are ready, then one of the things that they also do is connect them to a mentorship system when they're ready. Because then they can get more one-to-one personal care and guidance that can help them to move forward in their spiritual life as well. And then there's also many opportunities for people to get involved in different projects. So that's another area. Does that answer your question? And
Yeah.
there's probably more than that, but those are just some of the things which are going on.
Yeah, very good.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yes, I saw a hand up here.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful and well-organized class.
I think it's in the eye of the beholder. But thank you for the encouragement.
Thank you so much. I have a question about preaching. I learning to do Sankirtan, and I really like you said the point. Preaching is about actually building relationship, and to build a good relationship, like you mentioned, listening is actually more important than talking.
Mm-hmm.
So in the busy cities like London and New York City, where everyone just like in their own world and passing by, I literally feel like, how do I preach to them in terms of Sankirtan when I only have maybe like 10 seconds, and all of you are my teachers, you're all so good. So I wonder how do I practice this principle?
So there's a few things to bear in mind. So that's a whole specialized area of preaching or outreach. So you take guidance from those who are more experienced in that area. That's the first thing. But also bear in mind that if you can get the book into their hands, that book will also speak to them.
Oh,
You see the point? So it's not that so when we say communicating a message or presenting the message, Prabhupada does it expertly within his books. So if you can get the books, Prabhupada says if you can even if they just touch the book, immediately they'll be benefited. Yeah, because as we discussed in this purport 1516, the Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of Krishna. So if they get that book, they're actually taking Krishna home with them. It's actually known that if people have a set of Bhagavatam in their house, it changes the atmosphere in the entire place. It doesn't matter what else that they're doing, because it's almost like they've installed a deity in their house. And just in due course of time, it will affect the environment, it will affect them. When we were doing this youth retreat, I heard about this. I wasn't in the actual session, but there was a brilliant session which was run by some of the speakers, some of the other speakers. And one of the things that they did is they asked people about experiences where they saw that Krishna had manifested in some way, he revealed himself in some way. And what I heard about is that this is in the ladies' sangha. So someone told me about this later on, that there was some, I think, young devotees, females, and they decided to do a Ouija board. You know, like it's a little bit of a kind of, ghost connecting kind of thing. And they actually ended up attracting some kind of ghostly entity, you know, who actually wanted to do them some harm, you know, like that. But what was communicated to them by the ghost is that I can't harm you, so because there's that thing around your neck. It's, you know, it's protecting. I can't, you know, I'm trying to do something, but I can't do anything as long as you're wearing that. Yeah, yeah, and it is like that. It's just on that point about the books. I was with Purnachandra Maharaj, the local distribution, and he was sharing a pastime from Sankirtan. So he was in one country and distributing books, and it was in America. Actually, it was Chicago. I think it's O'Hare Airport. That's the name. So there's a businessman who's running by. To your point about not giving any time. And so Purnachandra Maharaj was trying to stop him. He didn't really want to stop. He said, I'm busy, you know, leave me alone. He said, okay, even if you're busy, even if you can't stop and speak to us, you can just give something. And the man just gave him a little bit of money. Okay, just leave me alone. Gave some money, walked off. The next day, Purnachandra Maharaj saw the same man, but this time the man approached him. And the person looked a bit disheveled. He looked a bit shaken. And the man told him that, you know, after I saw you that day, that evening, I think, I had a near-death experience, he said to him. He said there were these really horrific creatures that were trying to pull me out of my body. That's what the man told him. He said, but they were trying to pull me out of my body, and I was horrified, I was fearful. He said, but at a certain point, they stopped and left me alone. And the man said to Purnachandra Maharaj, he said, I just understood intuitively that the reason why they left me alone is because somehow I'd done something for you. That's what he told Purnachandra Maharaj. And then Purnachandra Maharaj had the 5th canto Bhagavatam with him. So he took out the Bhagavatam and he opened the pages, the pictures of the Yamadutas. And he showed the man the picture and he said, were these the creatures who were trying to pull? He said, those were the creatures. They were the ones. They were trying to actually pull me out of my body. Those were the big creatures. Like that. So I'm only sharing this because, you know, do what you can ultimately, but understand that the book, it will do so many things. That said, do try and encourage them to read the books.
Yeah.
We've seen, even sometimes on Sankirtan in London, that someone's taken a book and then you find that the books have been thrown away. Yeah. Now, of course, that person who's doing that, that's to their detriment that they've thrown it away. But if we can try and give them the books in such a way that they'll actually read it. And Prabhupada's big complaint about his devotees doing Sankirtan is that, I'm glad you're selling my books, but are you reading them? That's what he often complained about. It's good you're selling the books, but are you also reading them? He said, I've written these books for you, for the devotees. So, did that answer your question?
Oh yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question.
You also answered my follow-up question because I did see many, like especially like festival, Jagannath, like Rath Yatra, just hand out so many, and later we realized so much is thrown away. So you answered that also.
Okay. We just try our best. Ultimately, we can't control what people are going to do, but we can try to create as favourable an environment for them to take and actually consider what's in the books as possible. So as long as we do our part, then it's between them and Krishna. Okay, thank you for that. Yes, I saw a hand at the back.
Yeah, I'm not a preacher and I don't preach. I just was told to come here and this was a great class. I appreciate it. But I do have a question.
Sure.
The first part of the question is, like, are there really people who aren't qualified to preach to? Because, you know, like that came up in the first part of what you're saying, and it's kind of a hard concept for me to, you know, accept. And the next
Well, can I just answer that first before you go to the next part?
Yes.
Yeah, because I think it's a very important point. So this is where we make the distinction that Lord Chaitanya says qualified, unqualified, it doesn't matter. So actually everyone. But the nuance is the following, and this is from the Nectar of Instruction. So there's a distinction made between those who are ignorant, they just don't know any better, and those who are envious, they actually hate Krishna. So the idea is that we do try to reach out to everyone, but if we see that when we're reaching out to people that they're becoming offensive, then we back off. Because by them becoming offensive, it'll make it harder for them to accept Krishna consciousness both now or in the future, because those offenses that they're making are blocking them. You see? So it may even be the case that someone is unfavorable at one point, and then later on they will be favorable. Yeah. So that's the point. So we have to have that compassion that we try to present it, but if the person is now taking it in the wrong way that's blocking their ability to appreciate it, then we back up, because if we can't help them, at least we don't want to hurt them. Okay. What was your second part of your question?
And the second part, when in the purport, the first purport that you read, there was a mention of books or the knowledge that a person should have before you preach to them. And I just wanted some examples of, like, if it was a person on the street or even a person that you know personally, like, what if you were giving them some knowledge to give them before you introduce Krishna to them, what are some examples of the knowledge that...
The principle is that you give them Krishna in whichever way and to whatever degree that they can accept. So, for example, if you give someone prasadam, you're giving them Krishna in a form that they can accept.
Okay.
Yeah? If you tell someone about some aspect of the philosophy, so you know what, it's interesting that you're struggling with this, because in this book, the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about different ways of the mind, right? Different states of mind. And it says that, you know, there's a state of mind which is more goodness. And if you cultivate, and it says that by chanting this mantra, you can also cultivate that higher state of mind. Or it says in the Bhagavad Gita that actually, that there is meaning to life, you know, whatever it is. So you connect with them with an aspect of the teaching that they can relate to, at least as a beginning, you know. Or, and this is, I was discussing this with one devotee earlier today, or also, you just let them know that you're finding some benefit from it. You know, yeah, I understand. I also had that struggle in life. You know, what I found for myself is I started to take to some spiritual practice. I started to do some mantra meditation, and I found that for me, it really helped me. You see, so it's almost, and so it's not you should do. It's like I'm going to tell you that this really helped me. You see, with Krishna consciousness, what we're doing actually, the mood behind it, and we touch upon that with compassion. The mood is just like this. It's like you're having a great feast, and you see someone else who's starving. So what you do is you point out to them, I'm eating this, it's delicious. Would you like some? You see? That's the mood behind it. So I'm tasting some benefit in Krishna consciousness. If you wish, you know, is it something that you'd like to try out yourself, you know, like that? Yeah? Does that answer your question?
Well, it didn't answer my question, but it did give me a lot of benefit, regardless. Okay. But I might have misheard.
No, let me explain further then. It's a good question, because what I'm trying to do is give you some examples of how you can connect. So what I'm saying is that you can give any aspect of the teaching that you feel will most help people to make a meaningful connection to Krishna. Yeah, whatever aspect of the teaching. So there's a starting point, and the starting point is based upon what kind of person you're dealing with. Now, that said, as a universal, if we can bring them to the chanting, right? If we can bring them to the chanting, that is especially significant. Yeah? If we can bring them to the chanting, that is especially significant. Because that chanting, in Bhagavatam is also the same, it's actually the form of Krishna. It's Krishna in the form of sound. So if we can bring them to the chanting, that's particularly relevant, particularly powerful. So even if it's inviting them to a kirtan program, right? Anything like that, that's particularly significant. Okay, thank you. I think it's 1:30.
1:34.
Okay, 1:34. So there was one other exercise I wanted to do, but anyway, I'll do it maybe in the future with you when I come back. But thank you so much. I hope it gave you some ideas to think about. Yeah, and you should know that this Sankirtan mission, this is an extension of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's own pastimes. So the more that we are able to engage in this sincerely with the right mood, it's not just an activity, right? It's actually an activity, but it should be done with the right mood. Everything in spiritual life, if you do it with the right mood, you make much more advancement. You know? And if you don't do it with the right mood, then what happens is you could be doing that same activity for years and decades, and you one day look in the mirror and think, how come it's not moving ourselves by taking to Krishna consciousness. We're trying to benefit other people by sincerely offering or sharing the benefit that we've also been exposed to. Okay, so we'll stop there. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Gaura Nitai ki jai, Shri Radha Govinda ji ki jai, Janta Gopram Nandi.
Hari Om. Grace Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you everybody for attending. We have Bhuta Bhavana Prabhu will surely be coming back to Radha Govinda Temple in New York City. Hopefully sooner than later. And we have prasadam for everybody in the prasadam hall, so please take to your heart's content.